There's been a shift over the last maybe couple of weeks, maybe a little longer than that, where some of the decision makers in college football have said exactly what you heard Guy say just there, that they know that it's inevitable that somebody will test positive for coronavirus. And so how do they handle that? And those are things that are being discussed daily, and there are differing opinions across the country, as you might imagine. But I've spoken to a few lately who have said that they really would take a model similar to what they do when a player gets the flu. And let me be clear here. No one's saying that coronavirus is just like the flu. There are obviously differences there, and they're taking the severity into consideration. But they would isolate players as a result of them testing positive and then going from there. And it's interesting because we've had a lot of people weigh in on this. How do you mandate social distancing for these young men? You really can't do that. And that's where they know that this is inevitable to happen, and it's a matter of controlling it. One person said to me yesterday, though, and I think this is really key, what if the entire team or most of the team gets infected, an entire coaching staff? They don't have a good plan for exactly how they would handle that. That's something that is actively being discussed and is a real problem that we could be facing.
Paul, what do you think?
I think what President Guy said is the most significant moment of the push to get college football back, because until now, all we've heard is, well, what if? And the feeling, Greeny, was that the whole thing would get shut down like we saw back in March. What Guy is saying is we can't be fearful, and I've heard that from coaches. I know Laura has expressed that as well, and it's extremely important. Yes, you have to have a plan, but the season doesn't begin for another 3 months, and I think they will have a plan, but the biggest plan they have to have is what happens if, and if they can implement that, then I think we're going to have college football, and we're going to have it in a big way.
And for those who weren't watching last week, Laura, I just have a moment here, but you've spoken to a lot of players, and these players understand those possibilities, and everyone you've spoken to continues to say they would want to play?
They would, and I'm talking about even some of the top players in college football. And one thing, too, that I was speaking with somebody about a couple days ago is that they can't also tell these players that they can't see their families. So we are talking about a situation where, they can try and suggest social distancing. They can try and suggest some of this to hopefully prevent spread of potential viruses, but they can't implement, hey, you can't go see your family at all. So that's a big piece of this as well.
Yes, it gets awfully tricky when you're not allowed to call them employees. Timing has been the most important piece of this all along. And now I'm reading about schools that are going to actually start their fall semester early so they can try and wrap up around Thanksgiving. How does that play into what we're expecting with college football?
Greeny, it plays into it a little bit, and that's more referring to actual classes and students on campus, which these are student athletes. At least that's how we keep classifying them, so it should matter. But I think that we may be looking at a lot of these football teams saying that almost all of their students and their student athletes are taking online classes anyway. That may be a way that a lot of these universities can even get things going technically earlier than they might be otherwise. And so there's this belief that there could be a resurgence of the virus in colder months, and that's where a lot of this is coming from. I have heard some models thrown around as everyone tries to figure this out that would have a season that begins on time and maybe ends early to avoid some of that could happen if the virus resurges. But then we also hear an equal amount of people saying, look, we're going to have to deal with this one way or the other, and people are going to get infected that play college football, that coach college football, etc. So it's more about how you deal with that as opposed to trying to guess what the virus is going to do and trying to shorten a season on the front end. It is, though, to your point, being considered as one of the many possibilities that could be in play here.
Yeah, so, Paul, yesterday on your show, and we played the soundbite earlier, Gordon Gee, who was the president of West Virginia, was previously the president of Ohio State, said, if a player on our football team tests positive for coronavirus, we have to have a plan in place that will enable us to not shut everything down and continue. What does that look like to you, and do you think it feels like a real possibility?
Yes, I do. This was really a seminal moment in this whole conversation, Greeny, because this is the first time a leader has talked about what we can do versus what we can't do. Mark Emmert has said we can't do this and we can't do that unless we do this or that. Gordon Gee, who is a very important person, he's 76 years old. He's twice been president of Ohio State. He's been at Colorado. He's been at Vanderbilt. He's been at West Virginia. He understands big-time college football, and he is insistent that there is going to be a season and we'll deal with it. And the most important thing he said is we're not going to panic. We're going to stay the course. source. Now, that's easier said than done, but it is positivity for a sport that is in desperate need of it.
Dan, what is it? As the former player, now that's really what I want to hear from you here. As the former player in you, what do you think of all this?
Oh, there's tons, Greeny. You know, if I'm a player in college football right now, I think the biggest thing is I need to look at the leaders, not only of my institution, but really college football overall. I need to look at them and trust that what they have planned for us is going to protect me. That's my biggest question. And that's my biggest challenge to the people, the leaders that are involved. You've got tens of thousands of 18 to 22-year-old kids that are looking at you for leadership. And they need to know that they can trust you with their lives, that they can trust you with their lives. And their moms and dads need to know that you are going to put the health and their livelihood before anything else. And these institutions and coaching staffs spend hours and hours and hours prepping for games, prepping for the one moment that they don't want to be surprised for or surprised in with that football game because it's the difference between winning and losing. They need to have the same kind of mindset with this. They need to not be surprised by anything that could come down the line here in the fall. And so if I'm a player, I need to look at those people and trust that what they're telling me is the truth and trust that what they're telling me is for, my best interest involved. Also, what happens if I'm a player and I do get the disease and then I have to sit out for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks? Does it affect my redshirt status? Can I get that year back? Do I need to go to the NFL draft? What happens if I'm a guy that misses time and my draft stock plummets because of it? Do I get some kind of insurance? Do I have to sign a waiver? There's tons of questions that the players should be asking the leaders, and the leaders need to have the answers because that's the only way that the players are going to trust. Those guys are going to put us in the best situation for us to play football and stay healthy.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.